How are we all doing today? This is Boggs once again, and boy do I have a video and a half for you today, where we're going to be tackling what is easily the highest pressure situation of any game of CSGO. Picture the scene. Your last teammate dies, leaving you alone with a seemingly insurmountable amount of enemies against you, ready to trade each other out and win the round at a moment's notice. If just the thought of a clutch like this starts making your hands sweaty, then this is the video for you, as we talk all about how to come up on top of clutches. To kick us off with the first chapter of this video, we'll go over some tips for clutching out that apply for playing on T's side. To begin with, let's look at pre-planned clutching. The key here is easy. Keep moving. The more you move, the more difficult you make it for the CTs. If they know you're in one place, quickly relocate to another. Keep them guessing. The trick with moving about is to keep being unpredictable. Never let the enemies be able to get a good read of where you're going to be next. The further away you can get from your last known location, the better, and the same goes for speed as well. The faster you can do it, the better. I highly recommend exploiting the extremities of each map for this. By that, I mean the parts of each map that lie on the very edges. These include places like Palace on Mirage, Ivy on Train, and A-Long on Overpass. Think about Fallen's crazy 1v4 against Na'Vi back in the day at Katowice. After getting one kill, he instantly sprinted to A-Long, leaving the mental powerhouse that was peak 2016 Na'Vi utterly confused as to where he's gone. Speaking of the Brazilian Godfather, if you want to think more like him, be sure to check out the new ProGuides exclusive course by the man himself. It covers how he handles IGLing, something any aspiring player should have a grasp of, whether you want to IGL or not. It's content unlike anything you'll find elsewhere. Before we get stuck into the rest of the tips, why don't you guys drop a comment telling me about your best clutch? Was it a game winner, or did it completely destroy your opponent's economy? Did you single-handedly wipe out the enemy team, leaving their spirit broken? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you don't have any to talk about, stick around for this video, and when you come back in a week to tell me about your sudden increase in clutched out rounds, you'll know why. So after getting rid of maybe one or two CTs, you get the bomb down somewhere. Planting the bomb in a clutch situation is basically you waving a big flag saying, "Come and get me," to the enemy team. You'd better be ready for them. The preparation for the post-plan should begin before you even get the bomb out. Where you plant can be a make or break factor when it comes to the CT's retaking. Planting too open can lead to being caught with your pants down as you tap in the bomb code, but planting in too enclosed an area will make it that much easier for the CTs to defuse. The key here is to make sure you plant with a plan in mind for that particular spot. Don't plant for CT spawn, then run into A ramp in a panic if you end up on Mirage. After the bomb's down, follow these three simple steps: unpredictability, aggressiveness, and escape route. If you play too predictably, it will be all too easy for the CTs to use some teamwork to take you down. If you play too passively, they'll simply clear out every position you're playing in and figure out exactly where you are from that. And finally, an escape route. Make sure you have a viable and easy to access escape route from where you're playing. If not, when things get hairy and the bullets start flying, you'll only have one singular option: to stand and fight. No matter how good you are, if the enemies simply group up, chances are you'll lose the fight. And if they come from a different location entirely, you'll just be stuck where you are listening to them win the round. Now we're going to put on our counter-terrorist hats and talk a bit about how you can do your best James Bond impression. To start with, we need to talk about the big one again, and that's movement. Whilst the fundamentals are the same, be unpredictable, keep moving, there are a few key differences. First and foremost, you need to play much more reactively than you would on T's side. Unfortunately for you, the T side will know they have the whole map to play with, and chances are they'll have a rough idea of your position. You need to react to the info you have and keep in mind what the terrorists already know. If a terrorist has managed to get into Kitchen on Mirage, chances are they will know soon that B may be clear. You need to react to that info the instant you know it, as a second delay can easily be the difference between winning and losing. Secondly, you need to play more proactively than you normally would if your team were alive. Whilst there are some merits to sitting on a bomb site and waiting, if the enemy team comes together, you'll get swiftly traded out. You need to try and take the fight to them. I'll stick to Mirage for an example. You're suddenly alone in window, something the terrorists are well aware of. You don't know where they are, but chances are they're closing in on either bomb site for the plant, or you for the kill. Sitting in window is suicide, and they'll be expecting you to pop out jungle or kitchen. Switch it up and get the terrorists out of the map by going up middle to flank them, or push through underpass. Even jumping down and having a look up connector is a better alternative. Whichever you pick, make a swift decision and stick with it. The biggest factor in clutching out a round is the bomb. If you have it in your sights, your chances of winning the round go up massively as you sit on that bomb like a mother hen. But in the situation where the terrorists not only have the bomb but manage to get it down on the site without you, the game changes yet again. If it's too far away, the best call is usually to save. There's little chance of you winning a 1v3 retake with only 20 seconds left on the bomb. If you're only a few seconds rotation away, however, you gotta get to that bomb site. The key to retaking on your own is to be methodical, make educated guesses, and think about what you're doing. If the bomb is planted for CT, don't waste time checking Tetris. Think first and focus on CT spawn. Again, using Mirage for an example, make sure that you're methodical in checking your angles and positions. Remember that you've got no teammates to trade you out, check positions for you, or best of all, for you to bait. With what I've said in mind, the last tip for retaking in a clutch will seem to go against everything I've said, but hear me out. You need to take some risks. Don't take a stupid amount of risks, like running into the bomb site and not looking at anything but the bomb itself. Use what you know to take risks that you think could work. Not checking a position is always risky, but if you know that the terrorists came from kitchen, there's a good chance they won't be holding the bomb from apartments. So you can risk not checking it unless you've cleared out everything else to no avail. And finally, don't ever be afraid to slap a smoke and some flashes down and hold E like your life depends on it. It works a shameful amount of the time, and there's few things funnier than dumbfounding the terrorists with a sneaky beaky ninja defuse. Let's move on to some tips that apply to playing on both teams now. The next big one is sound cues. Now before I get into this, I highly recommend setting up a clutch key. That is a button you can press to mute everybody. Reading sound cues always gets more difficult with 4 backseat gamers babbling away at you. Once you have this key pressed, it's time to keep those ears peeled. Any sound you hear can be incredibly useful as a clue as to what is going on with the enemy team. A dropped gun will easily tell you the rough location of somebody, or a grenade pin being pulled can tell you to brace yourself for a push. Both these things and countless more can be an integral part of you being able to clutch out the round. While you're trying your hardest to read the enemy's sound cues, make sure you keep a track of your own. If they can't figure out where you are before you want them to know, it spells disaster. But don't be afraid to make some noise. Holding shift everywhere is more likely going to give you a loss on time. You need to just find the right balance, which is something that varies drastically in each individual clutch. Just try to use your map knowledge and knowledge of where the enemies are to figure out when running is a viable option. The final part of knowing how to use sound cues comes down to mind games. Using sound cues to trick your opponents is easily one of the most enjoyable ways to come out on top in a situation. The most infamous example is the fake drop noise of Cobblestone. Even with it being removed from the map pool, you can still learn a lot from just the principles of it. Nuke is brilliant for messing around with sound cues, ranging from fake drops to breaking the vents and then leaving them entirely alone. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it is this. When all your friends die, your biggest friend is your utility. When the odds are stacked so high against you, you need to use everything at your disposal to swing the balance back in your favor. The primary tool to do this with is your utility. In professional matches, one smoke can separate the 1v2 into 2 1v1s. A good pop flash can single-handedly win the round. A Molotov can completely change the game in a post-plan scenario, given the huge time constraints. Use your utility. A great way to train this is to, first of all, take note of what utility you have in your pockets when you have a couple of peaceful seconds. Secondly, whenever you lose a clutch, ask yourself what utility you had left. If you had any left, try and figure out where and how you could have used it during the clutch to potentially collect the round. Every time you do this, you'll subconsciously become more and more likely to use your utility properly the next time, which will mean only one thing: more wins. For our penultimate tip, we've got something that isn't only useful in clutches, but in the entire game itself. That being said, it really comes into its own when you get into the 1vx situation. It seems like common sense, but you got to isolate the fights. If you fight all the remaining enemies at once, you'll probably lose unless you go by the name Simple. But a 1v3 becomes much more manageable the instant it becomes 3 1v1s. Like I touched on earlier, utility is a great way to do this, but it doesn't just stop there. Isolating the fights ties into everything we've spoken about. You can use sound cues to figure out where the enemies are. The more you move around, the more difficult it will be for them to attack you together, and much more. Once you've successfully managed to find an isolated player, make sure you deal with them quickly. Don't let their backup arrive. The best way to do this is to make sure you're taking a favorable fight against them, be that peeking an angle you're very comfortable with or sneaking up on them without knowing. Last but not least, you've got to know when to not go for a clutch. There's no universal rule that applies to saving. You just need to make sure that you think about it every time you get into a clutch scenario. I'll give you a few things to factor in, and next time you're in a clutch, try to think through them and make a decision about it. First of all, think about both your team's and your opposing team's economy. Does all your team have a buy next round? Or would a saved gun make the difference between an eco and a decent buy? Do your opponents have a ton of money? Or could you break their economy with a round win, or even a couple kills? Next up, you need to consider the time left on the clock. Fairly self-explanatory one here. You just need to make sure you check whether time is on your side or not. Third, try to think if you could save a better weapon. If there's an op you can get to, it can massively change whether you should go for the round win or not. And lastly, most obviously, just consider the odds in terms of enemies. A 1v2 is definitely winnable, and personally, I'd go for them more often than not. But if it's a 1v4, the enemy team has a lot of breathing room to make mistakes before they've handed you the round. That wraps us up for today's video. Did you guys learn something? Make sure you drop the video a like if you did and hit that subscribe button to learn even more from our regular videos. And since you've scrolled down, don't forget to tell me about your best clutch so far for our question of the day. If you really want to take your game to the next level, make sure you hit up ProGuides.com, where you can not only watch exclusive courses made by legendary professional players like Simple and Fallen, but actually hire your own personal elite coach from our hand-picked team. Without further ado, this has been Boggs, and I'll see you guys in the next video.